Okay. You've reached the True Word Faith for Life with Dr. Shawn podcast, and I am here at the True Word Faith for Life with Dr. Shawn podcast to deliver something I was going to deliver tomorrow morning, but I think I'm going to do it now because I think it's going to end up being two parts. And so if ends up being two parts, then we'll just do the other part tomorrow morning. But I had to get after it. I think it's just critical information. Are communism and socialism as good as the left says? And I don't believe it meets with the buzz, but you decide. And we're going to go over it. We're going to use facts. We're not going to use a bunch of fiction or hyperbole. We're going to use facts. And I like that. I like facts. Facts are cool. I think facts should come back into play here in America for sure, and around the world, no doubt. I appreciate the fact that on a Friday night you guys could be listening to anything, and you're listening to me prattle on. I know that these are very important topics for sure. God has laid them on my heart, and therefore that is why I'm ripping it. So I hope that you can hear me well. If you chime in and you happen to click into the live chat, would you mind being my sound tech and letting me know, is it loud enough? Can you hear it? Too loud, too buzzy, whatever the case may be. And you can also put in there, I hate your hat. It sucks. Why are you even wearing it? You can put that in there if you want to. You can put anything in there you want, as long as it's nice and kind to other people. If it's true, and the truth hurts, well, I'm okay with that too, because that's kind of what we do here. If you are on our Buzzsprout RSS feed for the podcast that is built for my mom said I have a face for radio. So yeah, it was a tough growing up. It was tough. But I got over it. No, I didn't. Just kidding. But I do have a face for radio. You will see in the episode description a link for Are We the SS or Are We America Titanic, the Titanic America. And I put that link in there for you to click on. And that's a podcast I did earlier today. And people seem to be all abuzz about it. Also, the audio only for you that can't stand my face or my hat or anything else about my appearance. The audio only podcast link is right below that. So communism and socialism, why believers must reject these dangerous ideologies. And, look, I'm going to introduce Marxism, communism, and socialism. These are ideas. These are ideologies. These are, to a great degree, cults that have shaped many nations, but with consequences that should absolutely concern believers. And I'm going to acknowledge the current political climate where some candidates and movements flirt with these ideologies, if not come out and French kiss them. I mean, they are all over it. So communism, I'm going to give you a detailed definition of it, but suffice to say, classless, stateless society, wealth distributed based on need, not necessarily. And in practice, it often leads to authoritarian regimes with centralized control. So think Soviet Union. I was just loving on my dog, and yeah, I might be a little allergic to him. Podcast puppy, he is not in here. He's with Mrs. Greener here in the other room. She does not sit in here and cheer me on for my podcast. She's probably listening on her own, maybe. Could you click on like? I have to pay her for likes. So anyway, we're going to go in deep on all of these things. We're going to talk about some areas where we're going to be fair. We're talking about some areas where it did work to some degree for a little while. So part one of this, potentially part two. I don't think I'm going to get to part two tonight. What is it? Is it as really as good as the left says? And then part two, if I don't get to it tonight, which we'll bet on that, bet your folding money on why believers must reject it. It'll be a podcast tomorrow. So anyway, remember those links. Click on those. Click on like and subscribe. Hit the little bell. So my brothers and sisters in Christ, I've been thinking about this. Today, I think before you go to the ballot box, some of you may have absentee voted already. But I think today we need to have a real discussion. We need to discuss a force that seeks to, it's trying to tear apart the very fabric of our nation. It's trying with a great deal of success to undermine the principles of faith, freedom, and morality that we hold dear. Now, when I say we hold dear, understand that I get that they don't hold it dear. They don't like it. But I'll explain the reason why. Even the morality, they have no clue what we're even talking about. No clue. And freedom of speech only applies to them, not to us. You're free to agree with them. I'm talking about Marxism and communism, and we don't talk a lot about it. Socialism, communism, Marxism. One of the current candidates of the president of the United States is absolutely on the fence between Marxism and communism. I know, hard to believe, but it's true. And that candidate is to the hard left of Senator Bernie Sanders. Who would have thought that was possible? But it is. She said, hold my root beer. So these ideologies, they've gripped various nations and movements throughout history. They're fundamentally and consistently destructive, not only to societies, but to the very soul of humanity. And you know what, as believers, we've got to understand what these ideologies are, why are they so incompatible with our faith, and why we have to reject them, especially when we vote for our elected officials. Look, the first order of opportunity, we have to build a foundation of facts. That's what I like. Hi, Miss Carolyn. How are you? Thank you so much for joining me. Let me know, as the newly hired for nothing tech engineer and sound commenter, how do we sound? Hopefully we sound good, because I don't know how to fix it. Anyway, look, anytime you want to embrace some sort of knowledge, you have to build a foundation of facts, not feelings, not emotions, but facts. So that applies here, these devastating ideologies and their proponents around the world and throughout history. Now, let me interrupt myself here to remind you about Sundays with Dr. Shawn. I think we're going to do it at 6 p.m. It's all going to be live. It's all going to be live. So Sundays with Dr. Shawn is coming back. I'm thinking either 5:30 or 6. I think 6. We used to do them at 6 at the Kehala in Delaware, and we used to broadcast all around the world. And we're going to do that again. We don't have a live audience here, but that's why we invited you. So all that said to say this, thank you, Carolyn. I really appreciate it. So all that said to say this, these devastating ideologies and their proponents around the world and throughout history, we've got to understand the foundation, or we're really in a pickle. By the way, Sundays with Dr. Shawn, that's going to be this Sunday, starts this Sunday. So I hope that you will put it in your calendar. If you like and subscribe and click on the little bell, you'll get a notification. When I schedule them, you'll get a notification. You'll know exactly when they're going to be. So I would love to have you. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm super, super stoked about it. And, hey, it is what it is. I'm going to get after it. It's going to be Bible teaching and sermons. So if you're not into that kind of thing, you say, man, that's not my thing. A, either you could give it a try, or B, you could just say, hey, that's not my thing. But if you love it, if you love that sort of thing, I would absolutely love for you to join me. Carolyn in chat, I appreciate that you hope I'm doing well too. I am. That's why I'm doing 2 podcasts in one day. Super exciting. So the success of communism, socialism, and Marxism, it's a highly debated topic, right? Because nowadays, colleges and universities are teaching communism, socialism, and Marxism is a really great thing. Now, whether you think that communism, socialism, and Marxism are great things depends on whether you studied actual history or you studied a revisionist fantasy. And their effectiveness depends on how one defines success and the specific historical context in which these ideologies were implemented. Each ideology has its own variations, right? They're very different. People are different. The ideologies are different. And different countries have experienced different outcomes. When they've adopted these systems, they've experienced different outcomes. So here's a breakdown of how they fared. And you decide if this is something you want. So communism, let's take that first. Everybody knows that name. We'll go with that one first because that's what seems to be everybody talks about nowadays. Communism and socialism, really loved by the university class. Communism, as envisioned by Karl Marx, is a classless. Now, that is not to say they don't have any class or elegance. There are no classes. In today's podcast, the SS Titanic, or Titanic, Are We Titanic America? I talked about, let's see here. Do I have this how it's supposed to be? I do not think I did. Sorry about that. A classless society, you know, in India, from which Kamala Harris's mother comes, they were in a very high caste or class, community group. They were in a very high one, right? You could be the very low one. She loves to go on and on about how I was raised by a single mother. That's her answer to every question, quite frankly. Hey, is it sunny outside? Well, I don't know if you know, but I was raised by a single mother. Come on. For Pete's sake. I don't know why Pete takes such a beating, but he does. She wasn't just raised by a single mother. She had a father. He was an involved father, more so than they like to talk about. It looks good to say. Anyway, go listen to that. I put the link in there. Don't make me redo the whole thing. Good lands. So it's a classless society in that there's no rich, there's no middle, there's no poor. It's just, there's no classes. Everybody gets a fair shake. Everybody gets the deal. Isn't that great? We're going to do that. So the people that aren't willing to work, they get as much as the people that are. And the people that are busting their hump, well, they get the same as the people that aren't. I'm just saying. So it's a classless, stateless society where all property is owned communally, in other words, by the state, and wealth is distributed based on need, in other words, based on how much the state wants to give you. In practice, however, most attempts at communism have resulted in authoritarian governments with centralized control over the economy and society. And just say, when I say most, I mean all. So I'm going to give you some historic examples. Soviet Union, USSR. It was established after the Russian Revolution in 1917, and it implemented Marxist-Leninist principles. So initially, the Soviet Union achieved rapid industrialization and military strength, but its authoritarian governance, its lack of political freedoms, its suppression of dissent, which means killing the people that you don't like because they don't like what you're doing. They have a different idea. You kill them. That's political dissent. That's political. But so when somebody says dissent, that's what they mean, killing you. And economic inefficiencies, which when someone says that, that's an egghead thing. When someone says that, it means you're starving to death. Starving to death. So ultimately, this led to its collapse in 1991, right? Remember, the USSR, it imploded. Now, famines such as in the Ukraine in the 1930s and economic stagnation and widespread human rights abuses, it marred the Soviet experience. The Soviet experiment was wrecked by these things. How about Maoist China? Now, most young people nowadays, they don't know what Maoist China is. They don't have any clue what Maoist China. They don't know who Mao Zedong is because they don't study history. They study revisionist history. Or if they study him, they say, well, he's a pretty great guy. Pretty great guy. You know, remember some years back there was a Christmas tree decorated with ornaments that had Lenin and Stalin, Karl Marx, Mao Zedong on them. And they bad. And it was in the White House. But you guess who? So under Mao Zedong, China implemented communist policies, right? Same thing. State, nobody owns anything. The state owns everything. And we share it with everybody according to their need or according to how well they go along with the program. Anyway, we're not going to get anywhere if you keep interrupting me. I say that to myself. So this great leap, do you remember hearing this? The great leap forward, if you studied in an actual school? This is a communist policy that they called the Great Leap Forward and the Cultural Revolution. So these policies, they were the direct cause of widespread famine. When we speak of famine, we speak of famine in Russia and in North Korea, in China. When we speak of famine, we're talking about people who died of starvation. Political repression, when we speak of repression in any of those places, that means people weren't allowed to say what they thought. And if they did, they got put in camps or they got killed. I may be redundant on that. By getting put in a camp, most of the people got dead. And the deaths of millions and millions and millions of people. Now, you might say, I just don't think that's true. I don't understand how that could be true. How could I not know that? Yeah, my point exactly. How could you not know that? Look, don't feel too bad. Maybe you went to a school and they didn't teach you these things. But I'm going to teach you. Old Dr. Shawn's going to bring you free. This costs you nothing. All I ask is you click on that stupid little subscribe thing. Is that so hard? Is that so hard? Is it so hard? I don't know. Shawn, I think it's pretty easy. I had to lose that hat. It was 1,000,000 degrees. Anyway, after Mao's death, China adopted market reforms under Deng Xiaoping, leading to rapid economic growth. Though I don't know. I wasn't sure what I wanted to say here. The country remains politically communist under the leadership of the Communist Party, the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP. But it goes way, way deeper than that because they're in everything, right? Even though they say, well, we're a model for businesses, they're involved in everything. And you don't do anything unless they say you can. And you don't get to keep what you make. And you say, well, that's neither do we. We pay taxes. Well, they collect the taxes a little bit differently than we do. Communism, as implemented in the 20th century, largely failed to achieve the egalitarian and the prosperous societies it promised. In fact, being an agrarian ideal originally, and a big part of it, hey, we're going to grow food, we're going to give it away. We're going to grow food. We're just going to give it away. We're going to give it away to people that are hungry. Everybody's going to have a fair share. But guess what happened? They weren't so great at growing food. They needed a lot of help. And so the United States grew a lot of grains, believe it or not, even though they have so much rice. We try to teach them how to grow corn. We a lot of things. I mean, we just try to teach them how to do bigger farming. Now, listen, not for nothing, but our food supply is pretty highly processed. And by pretty, I mean completely. And we don't have health care. We have sick care as a result of it. That's for another podcast. But the bottom line is they promised prosperity. They promised egalitarian society, and it didn't happen. Didn't happen. Not it didn't happen in some. It didn't happen at all. And the lack of political freedom, the total and complete economic inefficiency, and the widespread repression, and by repression we mean shooting people who dared not cheer you on as the greatest thing since sliced bread, they are often cited as reasons for the failure of the communist regimes. Now look, the second part of this, I'm going to teach you why it really failed. Yeah, the widespread repression, that sucked. We don't like that. Economic inefficiency, well, that drew air. And then the lack of political freedom, well, that just plain couldn't breathe. But it was something totally different. Well, let's go on to socialism. Why not? Let's keep moving. This thing can't be 2.5 hours long, or can it? Socialism. Socialism refers to a range. And look, if you're sitting here, and I hope you don't feel guilty if you're listening to this live or on playback. Don't feel guilty that you don't know these things. Maybe you're hearing these things. You're like, wait a second. This doesn't sound at all like what Kamala was talking about. This doesn't sound at all what Bernie Sanders and the one that they give the 3 letters. I don't like her. I just she's dangerous. She's super dangerous. I don't say her. I don't not say her name because I don't know her. I don't know her name. I just don't want to give her any more press because she's loves press, loves clicks. Well, she doesn't know anything either. She doesn't know anything. She went and got indoctrinated, and now she's she's spreading the good news of destroying everything over and over and over. So socialism refers to a range of political and economic systems where the means of production are owned or regulated by the state or the public, the state, the government, with the goal for you Face Radio podcast audio only folks. I just shook my head in a very sarcastic no. It doesn't. It's owned or regulated by the state or public. No. The Communist Party, the Socialist Party, they own it and they ain't giving you any. With the goal of reducing inequality, not, and providing more equitable access to resources. Equitable access to resources? No, they don't know the first thing about that. They don't know the first thing about that. Why? Because they feed themselves like pigs. The bosses, the leaders. Corruption is rampant. Somehow or another, they're fat while their people are skinny. Don't know how that happened. It's magic. And you'll hear them talk about what, but if you say somebody on the left, you got to stop talking bad about communism and socialism because there's different kinds, Okay, are there the kinds that worked and the kinds that didn't? Because those are the only kinds. But they think, well, there's democrat socialism and there's authoritarian socialism. Now, they sound great. Democratic socialism, well, that's everybody gets a vote. Well, you don't get any vote. And authoritarian socialism is you don't get any vote. So Nordic countries, you've heard a lot about that. And maybe you don't know that, democratic socialist countries like Sweden or Denmark or Norway, maybe you didn't know they were socialist countries. Well, they're different. They're different. They're democratic socialist countries. That's just so different. And it's very different. No, it's not. Sweden, Denmark, Norway, they've implemented what's referred to as democratic socialism or social democracy. And these countries combine strong, vibrant welfare states. I'm making a face for you, face for radio, audio only people. You can't see it, but I hope you can feel it. Strong welfare states, oppressively high taxes. And by oppressively high, I mean 70 to 90%. Yeah. You say, well, wait, how do they live? I don't know. A lot of them are killing themselves. A lot of them are moving out of this awful, awful place as soon as they can. Now, look, I want to say I've been to all of them, Sweden, Denmark, and Norway. I've been to Russia. I've been to lots of countries. And I can tell you, among the ones, Sweden, Denmark, and Norway are pretty nice places. Now they're overrun by Muslims because they said, hey, we want to welcome everybody. I'm going to put on my radio voice now. Yeah, we want to welcome their good folks from the countries that believe in having sex with 6-year-old girls is okay. And well, we want to welcome those refugees from those places that have nothing but dirt. We have lots of grass. Why in the world would we keep those beautiful people away? Let's just invite them in. And when they get here, they're going to love it so much. And you know what? I bet they're not as dumb or nefarious as all those terrible, racist, misogynist, bigoted Republicans. And I bet they're going to contribute to society. Yeah, I think they will. Wait, 1 year in, 2 years in, 3 years in, they're having to slam the door. Countries like Sweden, Denmark, Norway, they've had to slam the door on them. So they, democratic socialism, social democracy sounds great. Extensive public services like universal health care. We hear an awful lot about that. Universal education. You know what universal health care and universal education means? Universal health care means you have to get a heart transplant, and none of the doctors in your godforsaken hospital are capable of doing a heart transplant. Why? Because places that pay doctors the same amount as they pay, I don't know, the guy that sweeps the streets, I don't mean to be sexist. It could be a woman that sweeps the streets. I don't think they're signing up so much. They're going to medical school and they're going somewhere else where they can get paid real money. So universal health care sounds great until you wait 3 to 5 years for a heart procedure, or 3 to 5 years for a cancer surgery, or 3 to 5 years for a knee replacement, or even something simple. Universal education. That means the state educates your child, and you better like it. And allegedly, they have a market economy, right? So the maker of Ozempic, Novo Nordisk is in, is it Denmark? I want to say it's Denmark. Yeah, I think it's Denmark. And it's the number one driver of the economy. If it weren't for them, they'd be done. They'd be out of business. And what did they do? They said, hey, you know what we can do? We can just raise the taxes. We can just raise the taxes. Why not? We're taxing them at 70%. Why not? We'll raise the taxes. Okay, Novo Nordisk. They're going to pay. Hey, our other great drugs that are so incredibly great for you. You know what we're going to do? We're going to subsidize not only healthcare, but also the drugs. And you know what? We're going to let you, choose between what we tell you to take and what we tell you to take. That's universal healthcare and universal education. We're going to tell you what to think. We're not going to tell you how to think. We're going to tell you what to think. Now, listen, I would say that our elite universities here in the United States of America, they're propagandists. In my first book, I really did somewhere close to 4 years of research in the education systems in America. And, Anyway, that's for a different podcast. So those nations, remember what we said, Sweden, Denmark, Norway. Oh, by the way, somebody asked, well, what is what's the title? God and Country, The Collision of Politics was the radio show, which I don't have anymore. And then Excellence Killed the Church, How Mediocrity Destroyed America. That is the first book. It is not my best book. My best book is about to come out. It's at the publisher now, but I wrote the first book with, I was in pretty bad way physically. Anyway, also another podcast. So my point is they allege that they have a market economy, but really and truly the government tells the companies what they're going to do. And then the companies go, without us, and I don't know, not for nothing, but we could move to another country. I don't know if you know this, but they have pharmaceutical companies in other countries. We could move. So what happens? Then there's that push-pull. They say, well, we want a market economy, but, you got to quit telling us what to do or we'll leave. And we'll take 80% of the taxes, in the country that are paid with us. So a lot of folks will say these are successful examples. Well, they're not. Denmark is crumbling. Norway is crumbling. Sweden is crumbling. Now, look, they have high living standards. There's no doubt about it. I've been in both of them, or all three of them, and they're beautiful. Their topography is amazing, but they are struggling hardcore. They have very low poverty rates, except for the people that live in low poverty or live in poverty. You say, well, wait a second, that's a bit of a conundrum there. Yeah, they push those people around a little bit. That's like sweeping up before, somebody comes over to your house, hoovering up the carpet before somebody comes over. Well, it's not how it really looks most of the time. That's like picking up everything that's laying around and throwing it into a closet. Hey, come look at my house. Welcome. So glad you're here. But don't open that closet. So they're thought to have a strong social safety net. And what does this mean? This means, hey, I got hurt at work and I can't work anymore, ever. Okay, well, we're going to provide you with free medical care and we're going to give you a stipend. We're going to call you a pensioner and we're going to give you a stipend. Well, how much is a stipend? How much is it? Because that doesn't even buy groceries. So then you have a real issue. You're in a real pickle here. Anyway, that's a whole other podcast in and of itself. So their economies now are suffering bad farmer policy, horrific farmer policy. Their ag policies are beyond anything you've ever imagined. Nobody could come up with just a horrific mismanagement of what otherwise is a great agricultural economy. So now they're suffering because their citizens are hitting the eject button. Right? I talked about how Novo Nordisk, they've gone to them and said, hey, not for nothing, we could go somewhere else. That won't kill us in taxes. Oh yeah, they have workers too. And oh yeah, we don't have to give them the vacation that we have to give here. And oh yeah, we don't have to give all of these things that we have to give to employees here. And even people that don't work here. So they're hitting the eject button. They're saying, hey, I'm out. I'm out. These taxes are too much. This is like California, right? People are sick of paying the high taxes for what? They're just punching the button. I'm out. I'm hitting the button. I'm flying out the top of the cool car. And I'm going to parachute and I'm going to land somewhere else. Because I don't want it. And I certainly don't want it to pay for insane social policies and programs that I don't approve of. They're leaving because they can't stomach the astronomical taxes that seem to only go up. Well, let's talk about Cuba. Right? Cuba's, 93 miles off the coast of Florida, United States? Cuba adopted a socialist system following its revolution in 1959. I always have to laugh. These people that run around with these Che Guevara shirts and hats on, like he was some sort of just, benign poet. Well, he killed gay people, and he killed anybody that didn't like what he was doing. He killed all of his opposition. Didn't work out great for him, just saying. But the point is, he wasn't such a great guy. Oh, Cuba, hey, if you look at the brochures, they achieved incredible successes in areas like healthcare. You go to any hospital, you can get healthcare if you're from Cuba. Facer Radio, audio only, podcast audience. I'm making the big air quotes with a face. Healthcare. We call it healthcare. And education. Okay. Except that people are dying at alarming rates of relatively innocuous diseases and conditions, which in the United States are considered relatively minor. And they're educated folks. Again, big quote marks. These people are only educated based on their outdated ideologies of Cuba and their revisionist history. Cuba's in a pickle economically. They have slums in Cuba that make our slums look like Beverly Hills. Political repression. Look, I've said that term a few times. Hey, they know how to do that really well in Cuba. It's called pull the trigger because they shoot a lot of people. They throw a lot of people to the sharks. This means political repression means killing your opponents. It also means you have a lack of basic personal freedoms. You can't say just anything you want. This country remains under a solid one-party system with no political or economic freedoms. You want to get deaded real quick? Hey, I've been wondering where those camps are for people who don't go with the party line. Maybe what I'll do is I'll say something that doesn't go along with the party line, and then I'll find that camp. Oh, wait, my idea didn't work well because I forgot. They're going to blindfold me, and then they're going to beat me half the way there. So I won't know the way. That didn't work out. How about Venezuela? Man, we're hearing a lot about Venezuela. Venezuela adopted a form of socialism under Hugo Chavez in the early 2000s. I don't know if you know, but Venezuela has massive oil reserves. Massive. Now, they were popular. I mean, it was a popular place to be. It was beautiful. And they did great in reducing poverty and improving access to healthcare and education. They brought in doctors from other countries. But guess what they did? They relied completely on their oil revenue. And then they got a little fat, dumb, and happy. And they got a little corrupty. And guess what they started doing is they started writing checks their butts couldn't keep. And they egregiously mismanaged their economic resources, their natural resources. Insane corruption. It led to a severe economic and humanitarian crisis that is well worse than third world in scope. They eat dogs there, the family pets, the zoos. Yeah. Fido, that zebra. Yeah. That's real. You say it can't be. I can't believe it. Why don't we see it on television on the nightly news? Why don't we see the CNN people talking about it? Because they are educated to believe, well, that's them. They did it wrong. We're going to do it right. It's been every other time it hasn't worked out, but we're going to be the one time it does. Democratic socialism in these Nordic countries I talked about. It appears to be successful on the outside. Spend a little time there. I happen to know people who are from there, and they quickly got out of there because they said, I'm not paying that kind of money for these insane social programs. And I mean, you want to talk about DEI and all that stuff? Oh, my lands. Way worse there. Way worse. On one hand, there are some people that have a higher standard of living. Some people have a better economic stability until people get sick of working their fingers to the bone so that others can sit on their butts. Authoritarian socialism, as seen in countries like Cuba and Venezuela, they've struggled. They've publicly struggled. Economic inefficiencies, political repression, say it with me, that means killing your opponent. And just overall country mismanagement. It's horrific. They're incredibly corrupt. So I have a dear friend who his dad was a high-ranking general. I mean, general, that's high-ranking. But he was a high-up guy in Venezuela, and he didn't like how it was going, and he started to speak up about it, and they came after him and his whole family. He fled with his whole family, came to the United States. And that is one proud American. They kill the people that disagree. But one can only conclude that eating the family dog is a sign of it ain't working. When you start looking at Fido and licking your chops, it ain't working. And you say, well, what about this Marxism? This Marxism kind of sounds kind of sexy. It's got an X in it. Marxism is the ideological framework developed by Karl Marx. Right? These guys have been long dead, so you don't really hear anything about them outside of the liberal universities. And by liberal universities, I mean universities. So you don't know what they're teaching these kids. It's unbelievable. So Marx didn't like capitalism. He didn't like that some people could work harder and have more. Now, this is a dude that never had a job, by the way. I don't know if you know. Never had a job. No, never a real job. Everything else he'd done failed in life. He was never an employee, let alone a boss. But he's going to go on and on and on, tell the world how you're going to live, how you're going to run governments, how you're going to run your country. So he critiques capitalism. He says, hey, I'm all about a classless society where the working class, you're the proletariat. That's what that means. Working class, proletariat. And us workers, there's more workers than there are the capitalist class, the rich folk. We call them the bourgeoisie, right? Proletariat and bourgeoisie. We're just going to overthrow them. It's what we're going to do. We're just going to overthrow them because I bet you they got all of what they got by being on our backs, That's not fair. That's not right. So we're just going to overthrow them. And I'll grant you, Marxism influenced many political movements, including our current Democrat Party, United States of America. But you know what? There have been many political movements that they drove completely off of what they believed about Marxist, Leninist forms of socialism, Marxism, and communism. Look, Marxist-Leninist states, many Marxist-Leninist regimes, well, look at the Soviet Union, China under Mao, Eastern European countries during the Cold War. They implemented Marxist principles with heavy state control, planned economies, and suppression of opposition. And when we say suppression of opposition, we mean killing them. Now, while some of these states achieved rapid industrialization, and they developed very quickly in their early years, at some point you run out of money because who's making money? They face long-term economic stagnation, political unrest. Well, let's talk about the cultural and political influence. Marxism has been a powerful force in shaping labor movements. Did you know this? Now, look, I'm not anti-union. I'm just anti-corrupt union. I'm anti-idiot union. Negotiate fairly for your members. But realize this. They're not always lying to you when the management says, we don't have any more money because of all these programs you demand and all these super high salaries that you demand. I don't know. We can't. I hear that young people nowadays, I don't know. I just can't. I can't with this. Well, when the management says the companies, look, we want you to prosper too. We love when you're happy, but when you're charging us more than we can afford to pay because we got to make a profit, because we have to plan on ups and downs of the economy, ups and downs of the political, the legislative environment, the appeal of certain things. Maybe they don't like this kind of car or that kind of car. That's right, Carolyn. They run out of other people's money to spend. So, Marxism, it's a powerful force in shaping labor movements. I'm sorry to say, I don't feel bad about being a capitalist because it works. Look, Marxist ideas, the Marxists want to take credit for promoting workers' rights and shaping social policies in various parts of the world, even in non-communist countries. But those same countries, workers are not free to think, let alone speak freely. Look, when you have to kill your opponents to stay in power, things aren't good. Eating Fido isn't good. Killing your opponents to stay in power, not good. When you have to put up big fences to keep people in, and then when you don't want to deal with your criminals and your insane, your criminally insane people, well, send them to America. Why not? We'll take them. Check out your history. By the way, you can't come back. I understand. I understand. Intellectual and political influence, particularly when throwing rocks at capitalism, something they just don't understand. Social justice, I hate that when you have to put a qualifier in front of the word. It demeans it. Social justice, racial justice, gender justice. Oh, for Pete's sake. Again with Pete taking the heat. Why? Usually these are college students and professors, right? At elite universities paid for by their ultra-liberal parents. These same college students have been educated from pre-K to almost pre-K, pre-K almost, to pre-K, pre-K, like there's a million of them now, to K through 12. And then on through college by ultra-leftist, again, face for radio, audio only, educators who themselves were educated in the same way. But in terms of practical implementation, Marxist-Leninist states have dependably failed to create the classless, prosperous societies Marx envisioned. And it always resulted in authoritarian regimes where they kill people who don't like them. Look, communism has completely failed. It's completely failed by biblical proportion. In all of its historical implementations, it's failed every time. Economic stagnation, political repression, again, that's where you kill your opponents. Which, not for nothing, I'm just going to say in 2 months, the leading candidate for the GOP has had 2 attempts on his life, one of which split his ear open, killed another person, almost killed 2 others. And then 2 months later, also while under the protection of the United States Secret Service, that was going to kill him. 2 months. Political repression? We're saying it's in other countries? Come on, forget about it. Are you kidding me? The second one, just not that, a few days ago. It was like nothing. Oh, yeah. By the way, in other news, somebody was going to shoot the president again. He had a gun, had a rifle. He was on the 6th hole. Yeah, president was coming. Some guy in the Secret Service. Again, for you Face for Radio, audio only podcast, snap of the fingers. Oh, shucks. Didn't work out for us again. Political repression. Look, it didn't. Think what you want to think about Trump. Ask yourself, why? Why are they coming so hard after this guy? Why is the left coming after him? Lawfare and calling him a Russian and all these things and just these terrible, terrible things. Oh, he's going to be a dictator. He's going to be a communist. He's going to be Hitler. Well, he served for 4 years and he was none of that. Gas was cheaper. Everything was cheaper. It was all better. Despite withering opposition, it was way better, but they're going to tell you it was worse. Look, socialism has had conditional success, right? The Nordics. We can't argue with that. It's a beautiful place. That area of the world, beautiful, beautiful. But consistently, economic and political crises. Other places around the world, hey, involves the family dog getting eaten. Or you getting killed for saying, hey, I don't really like to have to eat my sweet Fido. I don't really like to eat podcast puppy. You end up dead. Look, the workers, they've had to work themselves to death for pennies and crumbs. For those elite intellectuals who always seem to want more, never. Communist regimes, it never works. The utopian goals Marx envisioned, never. Never, ever. Look, the left wants to say, look, their success depends on implementation. The wrong people tried to implement it, and thereby it failed. We're better. We're smarter. So we're going to do it right. We'll figure it out. Well, no, we're not going to be bad. We're going to be good. We're going to be super, super good. We're going to be the goodest people ever. Except, look at what they're doing in universities. They don't like the Jews. So guess what they do? They threaten them. They try to scare them off of campus. They tell the colleges, hey, divest from Israel or we're going to burn the place down. We're never going to leave. And we really smell bad. You're going to do this or else. We're going to riot. We're going to set fires. But those same people, if we just do their communism and socialism thing, they're going to be good. Be nice. They're not going to get power mad or power hungry. No. No, not at all. Look, what are the leaders of these places like? What are they like? Do they harm their own people? Do they enrich themselves personally? Well, there's lots of differences, but I'm going to give you a real quick rundown, then we'll be finished. As I said, it's going to be 2 parts. I'm going to do the other part tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, I think. So leaders of authoritarian communist regimes, that's what we're going to talk about. In many authoritarian communist regimes, leaders, and when I say many, I mean all, leaders centralize power. That means central to them to extreme levels, leading to widespread abuses of human rights, economic mismanagement, and personal enrichment. Joseph Stalin, Soviet Union. Under Stalin's rule, many millions of people died horrific deaths due to forced collectivization, purges, famines, including the Holodomor in Ukraine, 1932, 1933. Millions died. He killed them. And he wanted them to die. Stalin's regime was marked by, he was a million times worse than Hitler. Hitler was horrible. But Hitler was JV compared to Stalin. We're talking hundreds of millions. You say, is that true? Yeah, it's true. When you add in the number that he killed and the number that starved because of his policies, yeah, it's true. The number that died in labor camps and the gulags, and the number that the secret police killed that were never seen again. Look, they investigated any opposition and they killed it. Stalin, it didn't appear as though he personally enriched himself, but he lived a life of luxury. He had multiple residences, personal security. Why? Because the people wanted to kill him. Why? Because he was horrific and he was killing all his people. The consolidation of absolute power came at the cost of millions of lives and widespread suffering. How about Mao Zedong in China? I talked about him. Mao's policies, particularly the Great Leap Forward and the Cultural Revolution. Great Leap Forward was 1958 to 1962. The Cultural Revolution was 1966 to 1976. Catastrophic famines. Tens of millions of people were starved to death. The Great Leap Forward alone, it was estimated to cause between 15 and 45 million deaths due to starvation, forced labor, and purges. That's real. If you had studied real history, you'd know that. Now, you want to talk about personal enrichment. Look, Mao Zedong, he didn't look like he was a super rich guy because I don't focus on personal material wealth. He had immense personal power and authority over China. He lived very well while his people were starving to death. He had these insane ideological goals. They were disastrous for China, disastrous for the population. Now let's talk about North Korea, Kim Jong-un and Kim Jong-il. Bad, bad. No, North Korea under both Kims and his predecessors, extremely regressive, extremely repressive, extreme human rights abuses, extreme poverty, extreme food shortages. Every year, they lose between 300,000 and 600,000 of their citizens due to starvation alone. Every year. Mass imprisonment of political dissidents in labor camps. Look, when you go into these camps, you never leave. This regime controls all aspects of life, including media and access to information. It's called the Hermit Kingdom for a reason. Widespread poverty in North Korea. Widespread. But despite this, the ruling Kim family lives in an embarrassment of luxury. Personal palaces, 100,000 square feet palaces, expensive goods, lavish lifestyles. Look, if you want to look at the stark contrast between rulers and the general population, Kim is fat. He fat. He not even plump. He fat. Meanwhile, his people look like skeletons. They're starved to death. How about Fidel Castro in Cuba? His government implemented socialist policies, universal health care, education, all of which, hey, these are great. Hey, you want to die in a hospital of something very basic and minor? I know how. Go to a Cuban hospital. However, Castro's regime also killed political dissidents. He killed them. Restricted freedoms, meaning he killed those who begged to be free. He was responsible for killing opponents. Look, if you wanted to get shot, you got on a boat. And you hope that you could make it to Florida because he would let his soldiers target practice on you. That's reality. He imprisoned his opponents. And those opponents ended up dead. Castro completely mismanaged their economy. And no other but communist countries wanted to do business with Cuba. And even then, the dude was a nut job. Castro used to like to say he never had any personal wealth. But it was discovered that he controlled vast resources. Now, he wasn't as flagrantly luxurious as other authoritarian leaders, but he lived in great comfort compared to ordinary Cubans who had power rollouts, shortages, food, even of the most basic goods. Look, I'm going to just tell you, this is not something that we want as a nation. We do not want these things as a nation here in the United States of America. We want freedom. We want liberty. But more than anything, we as believers, we have to reject socialism, communism, and Marxism. We have to reject these things. Why? Because Marxism, communism, and socialism is anti-God. And I'm going to talk more about that. I think tomorrow at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm going to talk more about that. I'm hoping you'll join me then. I don't know. We're at 59 minutes. If I click on finish, we'll be finished before. Thank you for joining me. Click on like and subscribe. God bless you and keep you. Shalom, shalom.